if your heart and soul is into something that you want to do and you go and you make it, like, that's going to come across to people. And it's that heart and soul that people are ultimately going to buy from you.
Welcome to the podcast, Allan.
Thanks for having me. Always nice to meet people face to face off of LinkedIn. I feel like I've had a lot of really good luck and met a lot of cool people off LinkedIn. So thanks for letting me jump on. But yeah, I wish I had some like crazy story that, I had a good quitting story and just decided to start off on my own thing. But, I was back in college and graduated high school back in 2005. And like every 18-year-old boy in the aughts thought that I wanted to go on ESPN. So I grew up in Texas and went up to the University of Missouri for their journalism school thinking that, I was going to be on ESPN and do the sports journalist thing for a while, and got into the program and, thought it was a lot of fun, but very quickly realized, like, I do not like news.
Yeah.
I do not like working in news. I do not like working in TV news. It was a beating, and was like, oh, and, to get to ESPN, you're having to start off in, some teeny market covering, youth sports and town hall meetings and things like that. And was like, for $20,000 a year, was like, even 2009 money. You're like, this is not great.
Yeah.
And
one of the cool things, like the big productions, and that's not where you start.
No. And, I think probably some of that was my own ego being shattered a little bit. But, I had the opportunity after my sophomore year of college to go spend the summer in Zambia. And when I was there, I was like, man, like, these are stories that I want to tell. These people are incredible. I love this. And, the organization wasn't the best that I was there with and learned a lot, but, sort of had this idea of like, well, we should just make documentaries. And so at the time it was like, we're going to make feature documentaries. Right. And that's what we're going to do. And as time went on and we're like, oh, this YouTube thing, this Facebook thing seems like it's catching on.
Yeah.
And so it turned into, oh, people are going to need video content and photography and things like that for social media. And so I was talking with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and she was like, well, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. We're like, okay. And so we, graduated and got married way too young right after the 2008 crash and 2009-10 recession. And so we moved to Texas because there seemed like there was a little bit more opportunity back here, and I still had some connections from growing up, and wound up, interestingly enough, getting a job at Channel 5 here for a little bit as an overnight editor from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. and did that for about 6 months, and then met or was talking to somebody else there and was like, hey, how long have you worked here at the TV station? And she was like, well, I got this job right out of college, and that was 15 years ago. And I was like, and you're still in the same job that I'm in now. So
yikes,
I can see where this is going. And, it was really eye-opening because, Dallas is a top 5 market, and,
right.
It was an NBC station, owned and operated. It wasn't a subsidiary. And so people don't go from Dallas markets to LA or New York. Like, it's
right.
People go to Dallas and like, that's, it's the mountaintop, so to speak, unless you're going national. And it was just like, man, these people are cynical. It's not very happy. It just wasn't a very happy environment,
Yeah.
And this is supposedly one of the top. And, for better or worse, I was like, okay, well, this is a dead end here. You're happy to just let me sit in an edit bay overnight. And, they didn't let me go out and shoot anything. They didn't let me do stuff like that. They just wanted me to sit there, and if news broke, they were like, well, we need an editor here. It's like, well, news break should go live. So
yeah,
I'm just sitting here watching the live shot, not really doing anything, and
and
started sending my resume out, and
this is not what I want to do.
Yeah. And so I started sending my resume out, and we filed our LLC paperwork to start our company, 1A Productions, and right out of the gates, we lucked out and landed a really big contract with a big medical center, medical school here in Dallas. And we're like, well, this is easy. This is great. Turned in my 2 weeks notice and did that. And, it was really cool. We were churning content, hand over fist for them in their marketing department and working with Nobel Prize winners and telling stories in the medical space. And we're like, this is amazing. And like all good things and stuff like that, there's leadership turnover and stuff. And they were like, all right, we're going to let everybody's freelance contracts expire. Like, okay, well, that stinks. And they were like, all right, and here's the new RFP. And I'd never done an RFP process at that point in our, mid-20s.
Right.
But I totally botched it. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, had this 10-page RFP document written by healthcare lawyers. So, totally botched it. Got disqualified even after doing 2 years, of work with them. And so that came to a grinding halt.
Yeah, it's hard when people move like positions because then your clients start to maybe change, or you have to figure out a way to keep that clientele while the people are changing out of positions that you really got along with.
For sure, and whoever's coming in, they may have their people that they like from previous situations and things, which is great, but they're happy to give their folks a shot and let you go and learn that lesson the hard way, right? Right off the bat. And, all of a sudden we're like, oh, this is what starting a business is. This is hard. And
it's too good to be true sometimes when you're like first starting out and you're like, this is great. Why doesn't everybody do this? And then you start to hit those like low periods. You're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a huge blessing because it let us, get our feet on the ground, get things moving and get out of the, the corporate news world and into it. But, all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, this is hard.
Yeah.
I've got to convince people. And then, in that time, more people are starting to come into the space. The tools have only gotten more democratized, which is awesome that, we have all of these incredible tools at our fingertips, but, more and more people start entering the space, and now you're actually competing with folks for jobs. You're not that creative and you're not that original as you thought you were.
Yeah, right.
Starting out. And, it was around that time that I came across a blog post of all things by, I want to say she's a Christian author. Her name is Sarah Bessey, I believe, is the one who wrote this article. I need to go back and confirm that. But the whole gist of the article was, what do you do in tough times? And the whole thesis was, well, you just keep not quitting. And I was like, okay. It's like, you might quit tomorrow. That's fine. We'll deal with that tomorrow, but just don't quit today.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, we could do that. So in those times, there have been plenty of times where we're like, all right, well, I'm going to quit tomorrow, but I'm just going to get through today first.
Yeah.
And, you turn around and all of a sudden it's 12 years later from when we officially launched our LLC, and, people keep coming out of the woodwork and we keep trying to run it into the ground and can't seem to do it. So, you just keep pushing forward, and 12 years, 3 kids, and, whole lifetime worth of knowledge later, it seems like here we are.
Yeah, it's crazy too. Like when you end up hitting those marks of like, oh, this is going to be the end, or this is it. And like, we're going to never get clients again. Like I've had those moments too, where things just dry up and like, there's no one contacting you and you're like, what's happening? This is so terrible. And like, now I got to figure out what I'm going to do. I can't do this anymore. Maybe people are switching to a better production company, or younger kids are coming in for cheaper, or whatever it is. And it's a lot. And like, it's a good way to live though, to not quit today, think about quitting tomorrow, and then just keep going for 12 years. I mean, why not?
Yeah. All of a sudden time starts flying by and you're like, what? I mean, we started, I was thinking about this because, we're in Dallas, and we got a job 12 years ago working when the Texas Rangers won the World Series in 2010 and 11. And my wife and I, we just ran memory cards. We weren't even shooting. Like, we would get posted up with photographers at various places in the stadium, and then they'd hand us their memory card. We'd run it to their editor underneath the stadium and then run the card back to them so they could keep shooting the World Series. And, now we had the Rangers, finally win the World Series this last week. And it was funny because they kept talking about 12 years ago, the Rangers. And I was like just sort of having that bookend right now just sort of made me reflective of, we didn't get to shoot the World Series or anything. That might have been kind of poetic, but it was still just sort of like those marking posts that you're like, holy cow, that was a long time ago. We've done a lot since then.
I feel like you could maybe try and pitch a little video with that,
Yeah.
I think it's like you said, you didn't shoot it this year, but maybe it's building this video of like you said, bookend, like we started our career and that's when they won the World Series, and now we're here and they won the World Series. So is this a new chapter of like bigger and better things? Like, what does this mean,
Yeah, for sure. And in 2011, it was if there's any baseball fans, it's the year that the Rangers, were one strike away in the Game 6 and blew it and then lost Game 7. And, so it's this huge heartbreaking thing. And, then this year they finally seal the deal. And so, I kind of like that idea. I might have to noodle on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said noodle. I'm on a podcast. I never say noodle.
It's okay.
So,
sometimes when you're on a podcast, you say the weirdest things and then you go back and you're like, okay. Yeah, I do that too. I'm like, I don't know.
That's something I would usually say.
It's all good.
but
So the Zambia thing is interesting too, like, because you started in a place where there was probably like a lot of stories to be told. Do you ever think about like trying to go back into that space a little bit, or do you do a lot of that work now?
So the passion, the vision was always to try to work with nonprofits and things like that. It was always sort of, there's these nonprofits that are doing incredible work. They don't have the personnel or the energy or the time to tell these stories. If we could help tell these stories, raise money, that sort of thing, we would love to do that. And, realize quickly that we also enjoy eating as well. And so, evolved into the corporate space, but that way we could give nonprofits, bigger discounts and things.
Right.
So, early on, it was pretty cool because we actually did get to work in, over the years. I think we've shot in about 14 or 15 countries.
That's cool.
For various nonprofits and things like that. And, it's started out very, white saviory of like, we're going to go into these places and we're going to give a voice to the voiceless and that sort of thing. And then realize very quickly, it's like, these people have voices. There's incredible things going on. We just have the camera to help show what's going on, and I think that's sort of that journalist in me that is still there of like, these are the stories I want to tell. And so, we've gotten to tell stories of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and we've gotten to, work with schools in Kenya, and we've gotten to, work with children's homes in India. And, we've gotten to do nonprofits about a daycare center here in Dallas that's for, kids that are in shelter, or it's a preschool. It's infant to kindergarten for kids who are in shelters so that they can have the same resources that, my kids have to go to preschool and things like that. And the parents have space then to go look for jobs and get back on their feet sort of thing. And so, I think there's always this balance of, we're trying to make a living. Let's not beat around the bush. But there's also the stories that I think every creative has, these stories, right, that are the ones that feed your soul and feed your creativity. Totally. And if you go too far to one side and you're just doing the corporate thing, or you're just trying to make the money, which is super important, if you're just trying to do that to take care of yourself or your family or whatever, it's really easy to just sort of get sucked dry, And so I always feel like there's got to be some sort of work on, the passion projects and the things that really feed your soul, and every now and then those two things merge, and it's like, a unicorn where you're getting paid to tell incredible stories that feed your soul. But, I feel like if you swing too far to one side, all of a sudden the financial stress starts to really creep in. If you swing too far to the other side, like, well, you're just churning content for corporate and taking the paycheck. But, there was a
point.
There was a commercial director one time that was like, there's the things you do for the meal and there's the things you do for the real. And you're
That's a
like,
good
okay,
one.
cool. Like, all right, whenever I'm editing screen recordings for something that just to eat, then great. We'll do that. And then there's the things where you're like, okay, this is magic.
Yeah, it's hard because you do have to balance those things, and you don't necessarily love doing it. Like, I get what you mean. Like, you can't get caught into one because it is a nightmare on one side or the other. It's it's tough to find those unicorn projects, but when you do, like you said, it's unreal because you're there, you're doing the thing you love, and you're making great content, and it also pays well.
Yeah.
It's hard to find those, but they do come up, and I think that's something to do. Like with the corporate work that we've found too, is we're trying to churn it into something that feels more towards the middle of like something we would want to watch. And I think that's what we try and tell our clients is like, let's take this story that's great, but let's like make it more like this so that it feels like everybody wants to watch it, not just the people who are just your clientele, So it like helps to have that.
And I mean, if you look at the places like the Yetis and the North Face and Patagonia, things like that, where they're building almost their own television channel on YouTube.
Smart.
Of stuff like that. It's they're making the content they want to watch, and you watch it, and then you buy a Patagonia jacket and
totally
things like that. And you're like, I'm part of it.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing a great job at it. I think you're right. They're building their own channels. I think that's where we're moving towards, is like not having TV and like the media that's on YouTube is like, okay, you want to watch outdoor films? Like, okay, go to Yeti, Patagonia, North Face. Like, it's not going to be like outdoor channel. It's just going to be these brands that people fall into, like, even like some of the Red Bull stuff, same thing. They started off as an energy drink, and now they're this massive media company. And it's kind of incredible to see.
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull, they're the pioneers of it, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they've been doing that since 2010 at this point. Like, I forget they even make drinks.
Right.
And maybe that's too far to one side, but yeah, it's like you're watching F1, there's Red Bull. You're watching skateboarding, there's Red Bull. You're watching extreme sports of any kind, it's Red Bull.
Yeah, it's really wild. And same thing, like, I forgot they made energy drinks, and like, I really wonder be interesting to see like what their split is for like where they make the most revenue. I'm sure they still make a lot off of Red Bull, the drink, but I bet their partnerships in like F1 and all these other things are pretty massive. I mean,
it's got to be.
They're way bigger than they probably ever thought they would be. I know it just started as like a dream. One of the stories I read about them is, in order to sell their drinks, they would crush up empty cans and leave them in trash cans outside of like clubs and places that were like where they would sell them. And so people started to see like, wow, lots of people are drinking this Red Bull. And so that's like one of their marketing ways of getting people into it, was just like showing that it was being drank in different places, even if it wasn't. Pretty wild.
That's, and now it's like they're beating up on Mercedes and Aston Martin and McLaren in F1, and everybody's left in the dust.
Yeah, it's incredible to see like Yeti, like you mentioned, same thing, like selling coolers. Like, coolers have been around forever. They came in and they were like, let's mix it up. Let's make story first content that's like really driven upon like what we want people to feel like when they buy our product. And I think it's really inspirational to see that. Like, I know my production company is trying to do more stuff of that nature because we want to be a part of those companies. We'd love to shoot for Yeti at some point. We'd love to shoot for some of these companies and help build stories, because that's what people want to watch.
Yeah, I put a quote together recently for a brand here in Dallas, and I mean, they didn't even ask me to do it. I was just trying to like sell them on the idea, but I started pulling stuff from Yeti, and then there's a clothing brand, Huckberry.
Yep,
it's also based out of Austin, and
I didn't know that. I love Huckberry. They're great.
Yeah, and they started their own travel show, with a washed up professional snowboarder who now, goes different places. And what I love about it too, and I think maybe this is sort of like millennial and into the Gen Z thing, as much as I get annoyed delineating generations, but it's they're using their resources and they're going in, and a lot of times they're telling these stories of these small business owners in Ireland, or these people that are working, off the coast to, heal the ocean from dredge fishing and incorporate more sustainability practices. And so it's like, yes, there's like the Yeti, and there's the feeling you get, and there's the cups and the coolers, and I've got a Yeti cup right here. I'm part of it, and but at the same time, it's like they're going in and they're lifting up these other companies that don't have these same resources.
True.
To it, and so it's like, I think that's what I really love about a lot of the stuff they're doing, is it's like they're finding these causes, they're finding these other people that are doing the really cool things that don't have the resources to put this content out. And it's that, they're giving a hand up to all these other people in their supply chains, and in the, Patagonia's obviously big in the sustainability spaces. And, I think that taps into a lot of like the original passion that I had whenever I got into this world, was, going in and finding these spaces that, these people that are just like working their tails off. They don't even necessarily want the publicity in the work they're doing, and sharing that with the world.
Yeah. It's like, how can you keep producing content to help others, but also still like you said, make some money so that you can support yourself and your family. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's the goal, is like, how can we make content that people want to watch, but it also helps people, and we can make a living. That's the unicorn. It's tough, but it is out there. And
it's all the Venn diagrams we're trying to get to overlap at that one intersection.
Yeah. Yeah. What's you were talking about sending a quote even though they didn't ask for one. Is that a process you often try and do? Is like, hey, I'm going to build a sizzle reel or something to show them my concept? Do you try and pitch like a deck? Do you try and just like pitch a concept through email? Like, is there a process that you find that works well for you?
Yeah. So this was sort of a unique situation. I had done some work with this particular brand a couple of years ago with some stuff, and I actually wrote a spec ad for them. So they hired me to basically do more of like a PR type piece for investors, or, PR, high quality video content they could send to, a TV station in a new market or something they were moving into. And I said, hey, we're going to use these resources. Let me call in some favors. We're going to tack on an extra day to the production, and here's a script I wrote. And they liked the script. And
awesome.
I asked for a little bit of extra money so I could pay the crew for that. I didn't take any money for that extra day, or the edit on that. Wrote a commercial, produced it, everything like that. It was there's this thing that happens that I notice both in the nonprofit and the corporate space, that when you give big discounts or even pro bono work, it's really interesting, because I find that content tends to just get put on a shelf.
Yeah.
There's not skin in the game with it. Right. They're like, hey, great, thanks for that. And they move on to the next thing. And so I find actually charging for stuff gets it used better. But this was something I wanted to make. I wanted it, again, for my reel. There was some, again, this was a place that there was some leadership turnover. It's a startup. So some people left, some new people came in. And when I found the new people that came in and was like, hey, I shot this 2 years ago now. It's here. Do you want it? The new people loved it. So we finessed it a little bit and color graded it finally. And they started using the commercial. And so I sort of used that as an in, again, just sort of doing a favor, because if it gets out there and it does well, that's great for them and for me.
Right, exactly.
And this is a sort of a travel services type company here in Dallas. I just don't want to give too much away. I don't want to
don't
make it sound like I'm throwing them under the bus or anything like that. I really don't mean to. But So I was like, here's the deal. You guys, this travel company is perfectly set up to where we could go into different cities that you're in, and we could do sort of an off the beaten path travel show using sort of Huckberry's inspiration, and maybe we could even find some other partner brands, for it to come in and be like, we got the travel side, we've got the food side, we've got the, wardrobe side or whatever. So I put together basically a whole deck for them with some of the footage that we'd shot for them in the past, and then how we could use this, and then some case studies like the Huckberry and the Yeti and the Patagonia and things like that, with sort of the channels, and here's what it would take to shoot a small pilot episode, but then here's how it could scale, sort of thing. And the week I sent it, they unfortunately wound up laying off a whole bunch of people in the 2023 slash and burn state that some of these fires find themselves in, unfortunately. And I was like, well, this is just excellent timing on my part.
Yeah. Can you repurpose it, you think, though? I think like things like that, it's like, all right, let's find who could do this, not all is lost. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've done the work, and I've done the legwork on it. And, the people that I sent it to were not part of the layoffs. It was just more like, this is just bad timing for us. So it may be a matter of, they might dust it off the shelf again. And that's the funny thing about this business. And I'm sure you've got stories like this where you're talking to people, it seems like everything's going great. Something like that happens and it gets shelved. And then, a year and a half later, you're getting a reference from them for a different job, or they're like, hey, we're ready to move on this thing you sent us. And that's part of the not quitting thing, right? Like sometimes the sales cycle is 2 days because they need something by the end of the week. And sometimes the sales cycle has been 2 years. And so, I see a lot of LinkedIn content that is like, get your sales funnels here and shorten up your lead times and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's all great, but man, sometimes it's just a crapshoot.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's not like you're not doing it correctly. You're not pitching correctly. You don't have the right email marketing. It's like you said, just bad timing. I mean, I've dealt with that plenty. You're like all psyched about this project. They're excited about your pitch. They're ready to go. You pitch, and then they're like, right now is just not a good time for us because of X, Y, and Z. And right now it is tough. I mean, I'm seeing the same thing with some of our clients. It's just, we're slowing down certain spaces because they're trying to figure out like, what do we do next? And that's tough because our production company works on like project by project, and like, we have some good contracts here and there that we're doing a lot more work for, but there's a lot of big projects that we pitch and they work out, and then some that don't because of timing. And it's hard to swallow that because like you work so hard like you did on a pitch, and you're like, this is going to be great, we're closer to this, and then it just falls flat. And you feel like it's your fault in a way. You're like, maybe I didn't do the right thing, but it's really like you said, just timing. I mean, they were ready to go. And so then like, what do you do? Do you wait, or do you go pitch something similar to somebody else, or do you try and work on something else? Like what do you do in this state? Do you wait for them to be ready maybe, or do you try and push it forward with somebody else?
I think it always depends on the content. I feel like a lot of what we pitch winds up being pretty bespoke to whoever it is we're pitching. And I try to not just cold pitch people if I can help it. I try to at least have some sort of an in or a human element to it, just for me. And I think that's the hard thing, is especially for me. I don't want to speak for all creatives, but I think there's always like a bit of your heart and soul in the work, right? Even just coming up with the ideas that get you excited. There's a piece of you in it, and so it is really hard when the timing doesn't work out, something out of your control puts the brakes on, or they even don't hire you and they go with somebody else for it, or whatever the situation is. I mean, it's hard to not take it personally, and not in the sense of like, screw you. It's just like you said. It's the like, is it me?
Yeah, like hurts your ego a little bit. You're like, am I not good at this anymore? Did I not do it correctly?
Yeah, and I think that's been something that's been really hard for me this year is, we started in 2011. We grounded out until 2019, and all of a sudden 2019, everyone just started saying yes to us. And it was just like, oh my God, like we did it, and then all of a sudden 2020 hits, and it's just, we had our second daughter February of 2020. And I had put off some projects to the spring. So, I mean, we didn't work from January until May of 2020, like 5 months, nothing. And that's even in Texas, where I don't even think we believed that the pandemic was real.
Texas has its own thoughts on things,
Yeah, we do. And, it ground to a halt, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do? But then all of a sudden, I think everybody in 2020 realized that, well, all of our old content doesn't work now because it's a pandemic and there's all this stuff going on. And so then even from just May to December of 2020, we wound up having our second best financial year ever. Like if we had 2020 in 2019, like I would have been jumping off the rooftop celebrating,
Yeah.
And then 21 was gangbusters, 22 was right up there, and we were just like humming along. The first part of this year started great. And then it just, we had our third child, a little boy, in April of this year, and all of a sudden, about 6 weeks after he was born, I was like, I haven't gotten an email in a long time.
Yeah,
I know I haven't been out like pounding the streets much because of this whole baby thing, but this is weird. And well, it'll pick up next quarter, it'll pick up next month, and it's just sort of been that like somebody inquires and then ghosts, or they're like, hey, we want to shoot on this day. And then I've had more days book and then cancel this year than maybe combined in my entire career this year. And it feels like it's the Spider-Man meme of everybody pointing at each other. Like, do you think it's a recession? Do I think it's a recession? Do you think it's a recession? All of us little guys over here, like, it's a recession for us guys. Can y'all make up your minds? Because I can tell you we are.
Yeah. I've heard it across the board too. You're not alone. I mean, we've seen it. And everybody in this area, in the Boston area, has seen it. And it's, I think there's all different factors. Recession, there's the screenwriters out in LA. I mean, that was massive and still kind of ongoing. So I think all of these combos of things just have halted content, have also changed the way people are spending their marketing budget. And I think it will pick back up pretty quickly, like once we hit next year. I don't know about the rest of this year. I'm not really sure. Like it's been kind of off and on for us, but I think you've been doing this for 12 years. I've been doing this for 10 years. So you see this type of thing happen, and it's hard, but you can survive it. And like you said, don't quit. Don't quit today.
Yes. Yeah. But, I think the point that I was starting to get at is, for me, it's hard for me to be like, oh, everybody just decided I suck at this all of a sudden. And, I think it's why talking to other creatives is so important, because it's so easy to just wind up in your dark hole and your own emotions and fears and everything else. When in reality, it's like, no, there's a lot of macro factors here. I was talking to a guy last week here in Dallas who runs, a pretty decent sized production group here in Dallas that does higher end commercials than I do even. And, he was like, I lost a bid to Spike Jonze. He's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, why am I even bidding against, Spike Jonze?
Yeah. How am I gonna win that one? Like,
like
if he would have known in the first place, he would have been like, I'm good. I'm out.
Yeah. Like, y'all are going with him, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. But I think, that's probably an impact of the strikes, right? Because he's like, well, I'm bored. I'll go do some commercials. And like us guys over here, like, please don't.
Please don't. Don't touch this area of business. This is ours.
Like, nothing against you, man, but like, cool.
Yeah, it's. I feel that way.
This is weird.
Yeah, I feel that way sometimes when I see like some of the influencer marketing stuff online, where like a big brand will hire like a teenager or like a young kid, and they'll do like a massive campaign with them. And I mean, it's not bad, but I'm just like, dang, is this where we're going? Are we going to this kind of space versus the like production company doing a nice like edit and marketing video? Is it just going to be like one creator with their phone making cool content for social? It's hard to watch that and see like that's where the big campaign went, when you're like, you've put in so much time and effort to build this thing that you're doing, and then one person like in their bedroom made like a cool video of them like DJing or whatever it is, and you're like, okay, I don't know if I'm doing this correctly, or should I jump on that bandwagon? I'm like, I feel like I'm too old to do these cool things, like, yo, I'm an influencer, check it out.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, and I got the guys on YouTube that I enjoy watching gear reviews from and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I would have started that 10 years ago.
Right.
Like, I practiced on-camera presenting. I did the on-camera journalist thing. I could have done this.
I know. I do look back and think about that. I'm like, I could have done this right out of college. I could have been one of the first. I could have talked about, but you could do that with everything. Like, I should have been on YouTube when it started. I should have done this when it started. Like, it's a path that you followed because of something, like you could go back and say, well, I could have done that, or you could just keep pushing forward and do the thing that you do. And that you have 12 years experience. So you're ahead of the curve for other people trying to start now, even if it's like cheaper to get a camera now. And it's like, wait, like that's the thing that I've seen too, is like people are less expensive. So like there's kids coming out who are charging way less, undercutting the market, which is fine. But I think there's still a place for production companies of like smaller size to be able to come in and have the expertise, because it is all about like understanding the client, understanding how to tell stories, and like that human emotion. You still have to like understand all of that versus just the gear.
And I think ultimately that's why the whole AI thing is something that it just, you're never going to be able to replace and generate that human emotion with AI. It's cool gear.
Yeah.
Like, there's some cool things you can do with it. I think there's a lot of ethical issues that we haven't ironed out. And I know I'm on the losing end of those arguments at this point. I understand that, but you can get off my lawn.
Yeah.
But you still need the writers. You still need the producers. You still need the people that are like, know that if I put a camera here, it evokes this. And I think I actually really enjoy, interviewing people for things. And there is that human element of like, how do you actually get people to emote in an interview when you're talking to them about their job at whatever corporate, whatever. And, I think those elements are going to be really hard. You only learn them by doing. So if you're younger out there and you can get a camera, just go shoot stuff, just do it. That's
what I tell people. Yeah.
I was probably undercutting the market in 2010, and people said the same thing about me, and so
completely.
You just kind of got to do it. But at the same time, like, it's that experience and those things where the value is. And sometimes it's hard to convince people that that's the value that you're selling them. But when you do find the people that get that, the pitch process is actually shockingly simple.
Right.
And I feel like half the time I can just send like a budget spreadsheet to them and they're like, all right, let's go. Like, we've seen your work.
Exactly.
Sort of thing. So
yeah, we know how you work. We know your process, and we know that we trust you with our project, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And people, we know that the people that we want to talk to will trust you with their story, because ultimately they have to trust you with their story and those things. And so everything else is secondary. If I can bring in a crew and I can, spend time lighting things, that's awesome. If it's just me and an assistant, or even just me, like, I know I can still produce really high quality stuff that may not look Hollywood, but is still polished, but there's still that emotion that can drive things and keep people watching.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you said, like, you were probably undercutting the market. I probably was undercutting the market. I know I was, because that's why I got so much work in the very beginning as a solo creator. But I think the other thing that makes me think of is, like, you can't rush experience. Like, you can't learn all of what you've learned in 12 years in, I don't know, a couple months or a year. Like, that's the whole point of why you can do what you're doing, is because you've had all these experiences. And I think people often overlook that. They're like, I have the gear, I can buy all this expensive stuff. I have lights and like I can set it up in a space, but it's like the experience of like dealing with people and like getting that emotion out of an interview is not something you just like, well, I just learned it yesterday on YouTube.
Yeah. And the experience of having everything just go to crap.
Yeah. And be able
To
to take
mainly-
that too and deal
yeah,
with it.
you know, and things going bad and losing a job and being like, all right, well, this person is mad at me and what did I do on that? What did I misunderstand? How did I not communicate very well? What was their part? And then, you know, moving on. Cause I mean, it's going to happen. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have jobs go south and you can't get the contract finished up soon enough. And,
Yeah.
you know, you get into something and somebody was wanting something else and you completely misunderstood what they were talking about and you feel like you were having different conversations the whole time all of a sudden. And, you know, having, you know, the humility to look at your part and also the thick skin to know that you probably did the best you could in those situations as well. And you'll learn from it and you move on to the next one. And, you know, it's that character building that, you know, informs your art going forward.
Yeah. You have to build it over time. I think what is something that you like, what's a go-to for you if you're trying to think of like new ideas to pitch, or like, do you have a process that you go through? Like, do you write stuff down? Do you watch other films from other creators? Do you try and figure out a space that you'd like to get in? Like, what's your process for trying to find new clients and tap into new work?
I mean, the best way to find new work is to do really great work and then word of mouth.
Yeah.
You know, it never ceases to amaze me, like, how much of it is like, you know, somebody got my email from somebody else and they reach out and you're like, oh, great, cool.
Yeah, just show what you're doing. It's like a show and tell. Like the more you show, the more that you're going to get work versus like trying to just cold pitch people.
And yeah, you know, interestingly enough, I got an RFP request a few weeks ago and I just sort of rolled my eyes at it and was like, ugh. But, you know, it was a decent enough
RFP thing.
Yeah, it was a decent enough project and I wrote it and, you know, it's been a year, man. I'll be honest. It's been a year and shockingly we won it. Like I'd never won a cold RFP project. I always just assume that they're trying to fill out their proposals. They already have who they want to go with and they're just using us to be like, oh, well, yeah, see, we opened it up. And so anyways, I
reached out to you just like, hey, can you?
You know, I had a connection through somebody else.
Yeah.
I'd had a call a year ago with it and nothing came from it. I hadn't heard from them in a year and then, you know, got the RFP in my email. And so, of course, you know, I was like, well, I called you guys. Like, I mean, I had an introductory phone call, but I wasn't super hopeful.
Yeah.
You know, I did it because I was like, well, I can't just, I got to try.
You got to give it a shot.
You know, I think that's actually the first cold RFP thing that we've actually won maybe in 12 years, in our 12-year existence. But as far as like coming up with like new ideas and things, I don't think any of us are short on ideas. I think I'm always like, oh, that'd be cool. This person's cool. This person's cool.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, one of the things I tell up and coming folks is like, you need to make what you want to sell.
Totally.
Because unfortunately, people that are coming to us are trying to solve a problem. And a lot of times they don't necessarily know what they want. And we have to help them in that process. But like if they see something they like and they're like, hey, I want you to do that. Do that for us. And so then you tailor it to what their needs are. And
right.
Like that. And you're like, great, let's do it. But, you know, people just sort of have to see it. We've lost proposals before because we didn't have a specific picture of, you know, you haven't done this type of shoot. And I'm like, well, yeah, but like, here's my whole body of work and time. Like I'm not worried about doing what you're asking us to do, you know? And so, but they saw somebody who had that exact specific thing. And so they hired them. Great. Good for that other person.
Yeah. I've seen that before too.
What you want to do. And then they're like, hey, we like that. Go do that for us. You know, a lot of times I think that's just what you have to do. And, you know, if your heart and soul is into something that you want to do and you go and you make it, like that's going to come across to people. And it's that heart and soul that people are ultimately going to buy from you.
Yeah. I think I've seen that before too, where they're like, we really like your work, but do you have anything that looks exactly like this. And you're like, no, but we could definitely make that happen. They're like,
Yeah.
no, we need to see exactly this. And I'm like, all right. And then they go with somebody that shot exactly that thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's tough because it's like, how do I break into that space if I haven't shot that thing? And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
like, some of the things we'll do is like, we'll go shoot like a test, like something
Mm-hmm.
very minimal, like not put a ton of money or time behind it because it's like we could not get it. So whether it's just a quick couple shots that kind of showcase what we could do, like a
Mm-hmm.
small trailer. But oftentimes it's like you said, we get a lot of our work by word of mouth. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like we put out good stuff and people like that, or we put out something that resonates with certain people. And then that's why we get contacted. It's not because we've got salespeople here like calling and pitching, because I don't think that really works that well in our industry. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen it work that well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm like, look, if I can't do that specific thing, like just for example, off the top of my head, like FPV drone, very
Yeah.
specific skill set. There's
Super specific.
I tried it a few times. I got super nauseous. I never
I've never
feel
tried
like
it.
I never
That's
feel like I'm
fun.
gonna do. It does look super fun, but man, I'd do that for
Really?
like 10 minutes and I felt nauseous like the rest of the day.
I feel like I would get like that then, because I used to be able to go on like crazy roller coasters and spinning rides, and now I can't.
Yeah.
Like I have a
Millennials aren't young
1.5-year-old. I have a 1.5-year-old, and like I'm sure at some point he's gonna want to do that crazy stuff, and I'm like, I can't. But yeah, it's so I've never done the FPV drone, but it'd probably make me sick then if
Yeah.
that's the case.
Yeah, but yeah, and it's like if somebody wants an FPV drone, I'm like, here's the deal. Like I can go find a really great FPV pilot and then I can
Yeah.
direct the shoot and I can choreograph it and I can work with them and their skill set
Yeah.
to do really cool stuff. But they're like, oh, okay, you haven't done it yourself. Well, I'm like, well, yeah, I can't do everything myself.
Right.
That's
But
why this collaborative space is fun.
yeah, and sometimes it's better that you would control the project, because some
Mm-hmm.
people who are great at FPV or great at camera work aren't great necessarily with the full project. So like,
Mhm.
and I don't think clients understand that it takes somebody to help like direct or produce the shoot, even if they're not an FPV drone operator.
Yeah, and for big shoots where we have the opportunity, I have a freelance producer here out of Dallas who's incredible, who I'm just like, here's what I need, here's the list, the crew list that we need, here's the location sort of thing that we want to do. And, 2 days later, she sends me a full call sheet. And I'm like,
So awesome, isn't it?
yeah, I'm like, you're amazing. And you figured out where everybody's going to park and what we're going to eat and like all of these little things that,
Amazing.
yeah. And then she's not dealing with the client and the creative, and I'm not dealing with the nitty gritty, and everybody feels better and more energized about the project. And so, yeah, it's sort of that thing where people are like, why is this so expensive? It's like, well, because if I have a person doing this, 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 and this, and, being a puppet master,
Yeah.
that's the wrong term. That's not the term I'm looking for, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Then everybody can focus on their jobs, do really great work. You get a better product out of it. We can move faster, and you don't need a 40-person crew. I'm talking like
Right.
five or six people, 7 people. You can
Yeah.
do incredible stuff now.
And it was amazing to have that group. And I think some clients don't see it until it happens. And they're like, this experience was like flawless. And you're like, yeah,
Mhm.
because everybody had their specific thing. And I wasn't trying to do all of the things, because like one person can only do so much.
Yeah, like I can send the shots that we're going to be doing to like a really good grip gaffer, and then they just show up with a truck.
It's awesome.
And I'm not sitting here going, now which airy light are we putting over here on
Yeah.
this? I'm like, no, like just put this here, like turn it down,
Yeah.
diffuse it a little more. Okay, great. Like,
Yeah. It's
like-
nice to have that expertise and also just that help. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes it a world of difference. And I know that people don't want to spend more money, but it's like, if you're spending so much money developing your product or your service or whatever it is, you shouldn't try and just like cut the budget when you're trying to market it. And that's what
Yeah.
happens, I think.
yeah, it's you see these like independent feature films, and they're like, we did all this on a $1 million budget, and it made $100 million. Like, yeah, but you probably spent $10 million marketing it.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
Like I'd love to go back and look at I guess it was Get Out by Jordan Peele. They were like, we made this movie for $5 million and it grossed 200, and I was like,
Yeah.
one, that's incredible. Like, it was a great movie. I loved it.
Great
but like,
movie.
it wouldn't be surprised if they put $10 or $20 million marketing behind it after it was done.
Yeah, they never share that part of it.
Yeah, or the Barbie movie for that
Right.
matter put an insane amount of money behind it and broke $1 billion and all this, and it was awesome. But I'm like, you guys spent a lot of money that it was not on the film,
right,
so to speak.
It was like behind the scenes.
Yeah, and so it's the same thing with products, right? Like, you're spending all this on R&D and market research and blah, 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 blah. But, you're going to come into the production crew and nickel and dime with
it's
it.
not a good
you're
idea.
Like, yeah.
Because you won't get the product you're working to get. And I've lost jobs for reasons of like pricing, and they end up like going with somebody that's a lot cheaper. And I'm like, you can do that. But we've actually had clients that have done that, and then they'll send us the project and be like, can you fix this? And I'm like, no, that can't be fixed, because that's how it was shot. And I think that's what happens, is you find yourself in these spaces where people don't understand why it costs so much until they see the real production. They're like, this is great, let's keep doing this thing. Yeah,
for sure. And then they come out and they see sort of the dance of it all, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. You're like, yeah, it is really cool.
Yeah.
They're like, can you do that? I'm like, no, I can't. I can tell them what I want to do, and they come up with the best way to do it. Just like you're telling me what you want, and I'm telling you the best way to do it. It's it's down to the teleprompter operator. Like, teleprompter operating is an actual art form.
Yeah, totally.
Because if I'm working with somebody who's not on camera trained, and I can turn to the teleprompter op and say, hey, we're going too fast, and they slow you down, I'm not having to give a note to somebody and get them thinking about it, oh, I need to slow down. I'm slowing down. I need to speed up. I need to, like, no, I can actually, like, the teleprompter operator can run the whole shoot because it's an art form, and they can help you with that and everything. And so, here comes my 3-year-old.
Hi.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
This is Nora.
Hi, Nora.
She has school Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but it's Friday today, so.
Oh, no school. Hang out, have
no
fun.
School today, and
love that.
Always jealous of the studios. We've always priced one out, and then we're like, working from home is fine, but it's fun whenever they just pop in.
Yeah, we ended up building this studio because we do a lot of like lifestyle on model stuff for like e-commerce too. So we do like photography and video for companies around here that's just like website based, like selling products. So that was kind of the need for this space, and it's fun. Awesome. It's just like, it's one more expense where you're like, all right, now we have to get more people in here and make more to just have this place available. And so that's definitely a difficult thing. Like, working from home is awesome and I love it, but it has become this now just to try and amplify things and maybe get it to like even another level. But it's tough because you build it and then stuff isn't always around to fill the space. So now it's another thing that I'm trying to do.
Yep. And then you're like, all right, how do we get creative with the space and keep it full? Because if it's empty, it's not making money. And
yeah, it's tough.
It's all those things. It's all the juggling act behind the scenes, and then that people don't necessarily see of this life. It's not just making videos. It's being out on set is a very small percentage of my time.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a lot of, and I think other people who maybe envy the job are like, oh man, like, so cool. You make your own hours and you get to do cool stuff. And it's like, yeah, there's plenty of cool things that happen, but there's a lot of not cool stuff where you're like sitting at a computer and like going through like budgets or financing, figuring out like, okay, we need to make more off this, or we need to spend this on gear, or we can't buy more gear until here. And like, there's all these like weird things that are part of the job that aren't as like cool and fun. And I feel like you work more hours than a normal 9 to 5.
Well, and even if you're not working, you're thinking
about working,
or you're playing with your kids, and that your kids do something, and then it inspires a thought, and next thing you know, your brain's off and running, and it's hard to like, it's really hard to delineate and set those boundaries with it. Mentally, emotionally, physically in your work. And we've talked about getting an office just for having the physical boundary of like, okay, I am not at work now.
Yeah.
But it's just not something we've really ever done.
I think it helps. I got a smaller space a while ago, and it helped to kind of separate, like when I'm here. Also for me to like separate thinking. So I'm like, I'm here. I need to work on this, this, and this. And then when I'm not here, I go hang out with my family and do that. And it is easier to separate it. It does get harder though when you're like, I should be at the studio. Like I shouldn't be here. I should be at the studio. And like you want to be home. It's tough. It's a tough juggling act because you're like, if I'm not working, I'm not making money, because it's not like a regular job where it's just like paycheck, you work the 9 to 5 or whatever.
Even if I am working, I may not be making money because
totally
I'm just doing this work
trying
here
to find money.
Yeah. But I've gotten to spend way more time with our kids than most a lot of dads do, and that's a huge blessing. And but like you said, at the same time, there's I feel that tug and of like I'm with my kids and I'm like, oh, I should be working so they can eat, and then I'm working and I'm like, oh, I want to be with the kids and
I know it's tough.
Be present. And so there's always that juggling act of feeling tugged in different directions. And it's also not the 60s anymore where dads just go to work and drink and smoke and don't really do anything. And
exactly.
Not that I want that life at all, but I certainly understand the tug that and in no way am I saying that I have it as hard as working moms, because I absolutely don't. But I understand like that pull to either side of your finite resources and where you want to be. So
and I think time is so valuable. I think often overlooked for all of this type of stuff, like creating, finding the right time to do certain things, finding the time for family. I think time in general, we take advantage of it and it's hard in this business because you have to put so much time in, like anything else. Like in order to learn the craft, you have to put all the hours in. In order to get to the next level, you have to put more time in. But you also have to balance that out and think like, do I want to be working literally my entire life just on this one thing and pushing next step? Like where do I stop and like kind of level out, or where do I keep pushing to the next level? It's hard to figure out.
When is it enough?
Yeah. And that's a hard thing too, is like, when is it enough? Like, where am I trying to go? I think you have to have some sort of end game, especially like in the freelance world, because if you don't have a plan, it's like, where does this end?
Yeah. And there's sort of that built-in mindset that if you're not growing, you're dying. And I don't necessarily believe that's true when I sit and think about it, but there's certainly that feeling of like, if I'm not working, if I'm not getting better, if I'm not competing, then you're sliding backwards. And then, all this ground you've made to here, you're having to remake. And I don't necessarily think that's actually true, but it certainly feels true at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you feel like, oh, if I don't learn that next thing that everybody's learning. Like I felt like that with AI a little bit when it came out. I was like, oh no, I got to learn this because everybody's going to use it. And then I started to look into it and I'm like you said, it's a tool and it will be used, but it's definitely not going to replace the way that films are created, the way stories are told, because AI can't have experiences. Can't experience. And you can tell that through like when some people write with just Chat GPT, you're like, yeah, that's cool. Like that looks like thousands of other people's paragraphs they wrote. Like it has no like meaning and experience built into it. So
if I get less views, but they're more positive because people are connecting with emotion, I'll take that over like an algorithm goosing AI post every day of the week.
Yeah, I've noticed that too with some of my posts I've done on LinkedIn. I'm like, why is this person getting thousands on this? And I'm like, whatever. It is what it is. It's like, you can't just work at something just to get the views. You got to put out like what you believe in, like back to your point of like, make the work that you want to make, and people will come to you usually to work with you because they're like, we love the way you put this together, and it shows, versus like everybody's doing this thing on TikTok or everybody's doing this thing, like I should do exactly that. Or gear reviews, like I should get into gear reviews because it looks like a wildly popular business. But if you don't want to do that, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how many, people don't necessarily see all of the work that the guys and gals out there doing that have put into it over the years. It's like they've been doing gear reviews since 2014, 15,
Right.
16. And I could get on there and do a gear review, and you're like, you don't see the thousands of other people that are doing a gear review that have, 2,000 views or something, which, good for you, more power to you to build it up. But it's like they don't see the consistency that's been put in over time by the people that really are, at the top and getting free gear to do reviews because they do have the time and they did do the work they wanted to do to build that audience. So
yeah, and they make thousands of videos.
It's so easy to be like, oh, I should do this, and then you do it and you're like, why isn't it working? I should do something else. It's like, no, you kind of got to trust yourself in the process, and that's really hard to do.
Yeah, and you have to put in the time and the effort, and you really have to just like focus on one key thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're pushing into trying to do everything else that everybody's doing, then it kind of waters everything down that you're doing, and it just doesn't come out as authentic as your work that you're doing just that one thing.
For sure. Yeah. And everything's derivative at this point, but try to make it your own. We're all pulling inspiration from all sorts of different places, but that's the human element, is that nobody's filtering all of that through your life experience.
Right.
And your lenses and your skill sets and your passions, and that's what makes it you and your work unique. And that's why, I feel like you and I would be sending proposals to the same people, right? And competing, so to speak, for a job. But, ultimately they're going to look at what you do and they're going to look at what I do, and they'd probably both be like, oh yeah, we like these guys. But ultimately they may pick you over me because of the way you filtered down your experiences and inspirations. And I realized a long time ago that it's way more fun to collaborate and celebrate other people's wins because there is work out there for all of us.
Totally.
And just because you and I are in the same space, I was in, if I can go off on a little tangent here, I did a shoot a couple weeks ago, just sort of a small freelance job. Of all things, it was a pop-up shop for a clothing brand that was targeting like women taller than 6 feet.
Nice.
And you can't tell from like this video, but I'm a perfectly average male. Like I am a 5'10" if the doctor's generous, 200-pound classic white dude. And I'm in this space that is women that are all 6 feet tall and they're all wearing 5-inch heels. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was a blast.
That's awesome.
But there's this one woman, Tiffany, who I met on LinkedIn, who hosted it. She's got her own brand. She's 6'2" and started sewing her own clothes. And so she started making her own brand and has grown it. And she brought in 14 other brands into this pop-up shop just for tall women, so that these women who couldn't go to the Gap or whatever, the mall, and shop for clothes, could come in and try on clothes and meet the brands and everything like that. But it was really cool. Super unique, and that's why I love this job, right? Is because we get into these whole worlds that are there that nobody even knows about. You're like, this is crazy, this is awesome. Granted, I was also trying not to just get a bunch of like up the nose shots, like with my camera here. I'm trying to like make myself as tall as I can so I make people look good. But I was like, you from the outside here, it looks like you brought in 14 of your competitors here to sell to a healthy market, but not a huge market.
Right. True.
Why would you do this? And she's like, one, because this market, these people don't get this experience very often to come in. And I mean, people flew in from like Florida and Oregon and New York to go to this shop here in Dallas for one day. And, so bringing that joy feeds her soul. That's the way that feeds her soul and what she's doing, even if it's making someone else money.
Yeah.
But she's like, ultimately, like, if all of us are together, we're all working hard, we're all showing the value of what we do, that just shows that there's the market for this to these bigger retailers that, regress to the mean. And so, I think in the creative space, if we can look at it like that, where it's like, man, I'm excited to see all the work Yeti's doing and the success that they're having, because they, it shows everybody what can be done with that sort of effort. and then that's only a good thing for us, because now whenever I go into a meeting, I can say, hey, look, this works. Here's samples of my work. We don't have to do the exact same thing, but, here's my work and my experience. Why don't we try something creative and new for you? But we already have these like proof of concepts out there that are working. So
yeah, it gives you things to show, like maybe they like broke down some barrier of creating content a certain way, and now you can share that was successful. And so I think you're right. It's better to share work and share experiences with each other than to like think like, oh, as a competitor, like I really don't like what they're doing. Like, oh, I could have done that better. It's like there's plenty of work for all of us. And I think it's better to share and like have these conversations so that we can learn more from each other, and also be like, oh, this was great. And like next time there's a shoot in Dallas, like, hey, can hit you up now. It's like, it's cool to connect with more people and be able to build these communities. And I think it's always been this weird, like film and photography has always had these weird communities where people are like kind of competing and against each other. And I think there needs to be less of that, because like you said, there's plenty of work out there, and it's really based on experience, and it's based on the type of person you are and the type of company you run. And not everybody's going to get a job just based on like how awesome their stuff looks.
Yeah. In fact, quite the opposite.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's meeting people, it's building trust. People are going to hire the people they trust, even if their work is not up to the standards that maybe we think it should be.
Right.
But also that's like how you get better. I look back and I'm like, people paid me to do some of this work. Like,
yeah, I know. I look back too.
Don't tell anybody I did that, please.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Too. I actually thought about something the other day. Like, I've seen it happen where brands do this too, and people and creators, they'll delete old stuff and like make it feel like they just started yesterday and it's always been incredible. I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, it's okay to have that stuff out there. Like, maybe it doesn't have to be front and center, but like I have videos on like a channel of mine where it's like they were like not great, but it shows that I was learning and it was a process, and now I've gotten to a different place. And there's always going to be that. Like, you'll look back from like 10 years from now, you'll look back and be like, oh man, I can't believe we shot that like that. Like, we should have lit it this way. Or like, it's always going to change. It's never going to be like perfect forever. And you're always going to improve.
Yeah. You look back at like some of the faded film sort of looks from a while ago now, and you're like, oh, it looks so dated. And you're like, whatever the look is now is going to look dated. Go watch Ocean's 11 from like 2000, and you're like, oh my God, this looks like the year 2000s. But at the time you were like, this is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like color grading does that too. Like, where people go through certain grades, they're like, this is the look now. And then you look back on certain looks and you're like, that looks so bad. The way that
this was
colored
cinematic.
That. Yeah, exactly.
You just crushed all the blacks as far as you could. And you can't even see anything.
Yeah.
I'd love to keep chatting, but I should probably go, as we were saying earlier, do some work that might lead to money.
Totally. Yeah.
Not that this, I mean, who knows, this might.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for me, Sean. Appreciate it.
Where should people find you?
Yeah, so if you go to 18productions.com, that's our company. It's all spelled out. So it's ONEEIGHT productions.com. You can see some of our work there. Otherwise, I don't spend much time posting on Instagram because I realized it wasn't great for my mental health.
Totally.
Things. I'm on LinkedIn. You can just look me. I'm Allan Thompson on LinkedIn. Cool. If you can find me, that's a relatively generic name, but just make sure it's ALLAN. And should be able to find me there, and add me, and just try not to sell me some AI thing the second after I accept.
Right.
But yeah, that's the social media where I'm the most active is LinkedIn. I've found that's where I've had the most luck, where I've met the coolest people and things like that. So
I feel the same way. Well, it was awesome talking to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again. So thank you so much.
Sounds good, Sean. And if you're ever in Dallas, hit me up. I'll take you to some good barbecue.
Sounds good. If you're ever up in Boston, let me know.